Hey guys, in today's show, I'm receiving Leslie Kapin, the Director of Impact at Astanor Ventures, one of Europe's largest impact funds. If you're working for a climate or impact fund, looking to start one, or you're genuinely curious about what's happening in the impact world behind the scenes, you will love this value-packed conversation. We talk about the impact journey of Astanor, how they went from a blank sheet 5 years ago to becoming one of the top impact experts in the industry, how to measure impact, when, whom is needed in an impact team, how can VCs support founders in their own impact journey. We also touch on when and how to conduct an LCA, why would a fund even become a B Corp, and what we can do as a collective space to collaborate more to reduce overlaps and speed up the process for everybody. Enjoy. So Leslie, welcome to Climate Insiders.
Thank you. Really, really nice to be here today with you.
How would your best friend finish the sentence Leslie Kapin is?
Engaged, for sure. Highly committed, highly passionate. Not passionate in the sense that I will be just focused on my topic and bore everyone to death, but definitely fully engaged and wanted to go to the next stage, to the North Star that we set for ourselves.
All right. And since you have a North Star, which is the impact, we're going to deep dive a lot on this front. But first, before we get deep here, can you present Astanor Ventures for those that don't know you?
Sure. So Astanor Venture is an impact venture capital fund focused on the agri-food tech sector. So bottom line, what happened is that, as you can imagine, as you might have heard, the whole agri-food system has been built over the last 70 to 80 years to produce quantity and calories without thinking about, the quality and the quantity of nutrients that you are bringing to the consumers. And more sadly, it's being built by outstripping the resource of the planet. So, we just took the nature's balance sheet for granted. That's the 2 point. Plus, as we know, the agri-food system is not what we call a sustainable and fair system for the people working along this value chain. So there was this kind of problem on both the people, the planet, and definitely the quality that we were bringing at the end of the value chain. So this really brings us to think, okay, there is something to be done, especially because it's one of the sectors that's the least digitalized at the same time. So perfect timing for an agri-food tech fund. And that's really when the idea of the two co-founders came from back in 2017, 2018.
Awesome, man. You've just announced a couple of months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, a record-breaking fund size of 360 million euros for the second venture fund. So you're probably one of the leaders in sustainability as a whole, with, I believe, 800 million euros under management. So you're a big, 800-pound gorilla. But you started with Astanor 5 years ago, and you had a blank sheet, you were telling me, to turn the fund into an impact fund. So how did you proceed? How did you even orient your work, throughout this journey?
A hell of a journey, definitely. So when I joined, the mission was always really clear. The founders knew what they wanted to build. They wanted to build impact within the agri-food sector. The question was, how are we going to explain to our investors, explain to our stakeholders that we've done a good job? Clearly 5 years ago, impact investing was not mainstream as it is today. There were only a couple of impact funds. Yes, the Gene was there. You had the Iris Plus, the IMP. You had a lot of things existing already, but not really a common language. So, in a way, yes, I had this amazing blank sheet of paper and saying, okay, how are we going to do that? How am I going to tell our investors that we deployed carefully and with impact and return equally in our mindset? And so when I joined, we had, we'll say 40 million, we raised 40 million at the time only. And I think we invested less than 10, and we were invested in 5 companies. So I already had a bit of, an idea of where we're going to invest. And the way that we tend to describe where we invest, and that's one of the reasons I joined when I first met one of the founder, Eric Archambault, was to say, okay, what Astanor is going to do is invest from soil and sea to gut. We're going to tackle the entire value chain and transition the system from being extractive to being regenerative. So this was the scene that was set. And I had those 5 companies to play with to say, okay, how can I find a way to measure impact for those 5 companies? So that was my blank sheet of paper. And I started thinking about this sector. We're not like a climate fund. We a climate, a nature, and a people fund at the same time. So you have to think holistically. It's not only about greenhouse gas emissions. Yes, it's also about greenhouse gas emissions, but not only. So that's when I start thinking, okay, when we think about the planet, what makes sense? Clearly, greenhouse gas emissions, because a third of greenhouse gas emissions come from the agri-food sector as a whole. So greenhouse gas emission is one of our KPI. The second KPI is water. We have to think about, water. The agri-food sector consumes more than 70% of fresh water, and 60% of this fresh water is wasted. So clearly, we have to think about water. We have to become more efficient. The third angle, when you think about nature, is for sure biodiversity, because the agri-food sector is extremely dependent on biodiversity, but is the largest driver of biodiversity loss. So you need it, but you destroy it at the same time. So biodiversity is key. So when we think about impact, how to measure impact, we are looking for companies that are going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that are going to reduce water use, and going to have a positive impact on biodiversity. That's all three planet KPI. We also have the people. When we think about the people, is the farmers and the consumers. And so you have to think about social. The whole agri-food system is built on structural inequalities. It's low income, it's difficulty to access to credit. And so you have to think about how can you bring a better livelihoods to the farmers. So that's social. And clearly health. Healthy soil, go to healthy food. And so we need healthy people, healthy consumers. So our fifth KPI is about the people. That's all five, let's say, key contributor KPI. The problem I had at the time is that I have a sixth company that in the portfolio that didn't fit any of these categories. And I had to think about how I'm going to feed those guys. And today we have many more of those guys. This is what I call our enablers. You have companies that bring impact insight to the others, but themselves don't have a direct impact on any of those first five KPIs.
Can you give an example?
Sure, definitely. Give you an example of one of the companies we have today in the portfolio called Allgood. Allgood is a US company that bring LCA, life cycle assessment at scale, for large F&B businesses such as Nestle or Danone or Unilever. So let's say Danone, they have access to Allgood. They will be able to understand the entire environmental footprint of this SKU product and understand where is, the pain point, where should I really do something to reduce my water use, my land use, or whatever it is. So Allgood, by definition, is providing an extremely insightful metric to a Danone, but you will never be able to tell, thanks to Allgood, I avoided X tons of emissions, or I led to that amount of farmers being reached. However, they're extremely needed because without them, large players in the market will not be able to decrease the environmental footprint. So this is exactly the example of an enabler that you need, but you cannot, they have a second order effect on the people on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Is it fair to say that those companies tend to be software first companies?
They tend, for sure, definitely.
Okay. So you do believe as an impact, and I'm going to play devil's advocate or push a little, poke a little bit, that impact funds should definitely venture in the software territory, even though the main metric is to have direct impact. They should invest in enablers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you cannot achieve our goals without enablers. They're part of the system. I'm not saying that we're going to go to 80% investment in enablers. I mean, my guess will be more in the 30%.
Okay, so almost a third of the fund.
That's my guess. Again, I mean, I will say a third. Yes, that will be my guess. And from what we've done in Fund 2 so far, we'll be like saying it's fair. And I do believe that you need them. And, one thing to think about as well, one of our companies called SourceAg in Fund 2, they are bringing all the hardware of greenhouses together through a software. So today, I see them still a bit as an enabler. But what we're doing with them is saying, okay, how can we bring them to be an enabler to actually be a contributor? Is there something we can do, get more data? How can we really measure the impact that SourceAg has on greenhouses and making them more efficient?
Don't you believe that there's performance tarnishing the impact conversation here a little bit? Because we know historically VC has been driven to performance by software companies. They tend to have more scalable models. They're not as CapEx intensive, and there's a shorter, kind of return on investment. Don't you think that corrupts a little bit of the dialogue, the hardware versus software, and looking at pure direct impact versus, or you're saying you're only purely looking from an impact angle here?
It's a pure impact angle because we want to transition the agri-food sector. And I don't think you can do the transition without the enablers. You need contributors and enablers. The two mixed together will be able to reach the goal that, the high ambitious goal that we have in the agri-food sector.
Fair enough. And I wanted to go back to that sort of impact blank sheet. You have those kind of 6 North Stars or KPIs. Now, how do you turn that into something that has to become an industry standard, namely SFDR compliant, Article 9, and we're going to talk about the B Corp certification. So those are kind of milestones. Was it obvious in hindsight, or it just kind of happened step by step, year by year?
It's definitely be a organic kind of learning, like learning because all this time you spend with our portfolio companies themselves, you learn a lot from the others, also with our LPs, we have really good relationship with amazing LPs and we learn from them as well. We exchange and we improve our practice. So definitely
who are the most
journey.
helpful LPs?
I will not put name, but I will say that we're lucky to have amazing LPs in, like public banks and sovereign funds, but also corporates. So I think I'm pretty amazed by the quality and that we have as LPs.
Are you trying to massage them here a little bit to help for next fund, or are you genuinely honest?
No, we fully honest because we closed our second fund, so we don't need them, at least not now. No, I think honestly, we have an advisory committee composed of our non-largest investors. And, one of the main focus of the advisory committee is actually impact. And they fully engage on the topic with us. They hear with us to learn as well, to share. They fully endorse some of the project we brought to them, the challenges at the same time. So no, I will say that, I do value a lot having them on the phone, once a quarter to see what's happening there. How can we collaborate? We're really pushing them. We've pushed them a lot on ESG, just on simple ESG. And I'm happy to remind everyone what's the difference because sometimes people get confused. But definitely on impact as well, because when we raised our first fund, our investors were mostly traditional investors, I will say. And so they were not like really into impact. Second fund, we really attracted many more pure impact investors, and it's great to have them on board because they challenge you on a different level. So I think having this combination, this mix, I feel like, we're really giving things to them and they bring something to us. Yes, sometime in the past on different things, we had some disagreements on, how to measure impact. However, I will say that even those investors that didn't have the same view than us forced us to go to the next stage, to the impact measurement 2.0. And I think this was extremely beneficial to have those issues, if I may say, of understanding and how to think about impact that fully forced us into the direction to go to the next level.
So you're saying there's a collaboration happening between GPs and LPs, and even though some LPs, as big as they are, might have their own framework, it is a collaboration. So it has evolved. So you kind of almost calling for that to carry on, right, with other funds, so that we are not settled in a standard, but we're collaborating together to reach that standard. And one of the inspiring move that you've done in the recent months is to become B Corp certified. This is new to me. I didn't know that a fund could actually become one. What's the rationale behind it? And was it influenced by LPs as well?
Not at all on the last point, clearly not inspired by the LPs. But one thing I think to remind everyone is the difference between ESG and impact. I think it's important because I think, the terms can be used together, while I think they're extremely different. So the way that we define, and again, not everyone might agree, ESG is about the internal health of our portfolio companies. It's about the internal practices that they will put in place, which will allow them to attract and retain talent. So it's really your internal practices. Impact, it's about the impact that their product or their service is going to have on the people on the planet. So it's the reason why we invested is the impact. However, there will be no point in investing in the most impactful company with the most impactful product without thinking about building the right practices in-house. This will be not a long-standing company because they will have they will not be able to attract and retain talent. So if you want to have a long-lasting impact, you need to build those ESG practices in-house. And the beauty is that we invest in mostly Series A or seed as well. nothing really exists when we invest. Again, we have a bit of a blank sheet of paper. And I know when portfolio companies used to fill the questionnaire, the ESG questionnaire the first time, they were like, oh, it's awful. I've got 0 or no everywhere. And I was like, it's perfect. We have a huge room for improvement. You started at 0, you finish at 100. So we can really bring you when we exit to being strong on ESG. And so B Corp is one of the things that we support our portfolio companies to become. And we don't force. Again, we're not forcing anyone to do anything. We convince them that it could make sense at some point, and the earlier is the best, because we do believe that B Corp is a really helpful certification to bring good practices in-house. And the earlier you do it, the best it is. Because at the end of the day, as we know, you're much more agile when you're like 15, 30 people. When you are becoming B Corp at 400 employees, I can tell you because it happened with one of our companies, it took them 2 years. So when you do it, when you're like a small group of 20 people where everyone know each other, where sits which policy, where sits this. So it's super easy to do. And so over the last 5 years, we've supported our companies to become B Corp. And as you can imagine, since day one of joining Astanor, I was wishing to become a B Corp. And things just took a bit of time, convincing as well everyone that it makes sense. But the way that we built Astanor was always, again, with B Corp as a North Star. So that was a year and a half ago? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I want to bounce on this. What does that mean from a pure financial perspective here? Or is it pure marketing? If I, again, kind of zoom out, B Corp, is it a marketing thing, or it's aspirationally setting targets and it looks good from the outside of it? Or does it actually bind the company, the organization, to go in a certain direction financially? It impacts the shareholders. It could impact the future of the company.
Fully impact the future of the company, because it sets the right practices from day one. So yes, you could see it as a marketing, but I don't think that's the rationale for us, because I don't think it's really well known, as you said earlier, for a VC fund to be B Corp. So clearly it's to set the right practices for the long term. And for us, it was to walk the talk. I've been supporting portfolio companies to be B Corp for the last 5 years. And I was saying, yes, but we're not one ourselves, but, no, it doesn't look good. We want to walk the talk. We want to lead by example. So becoming a B Corp was always part of our journey at some point. And it was the right time in March. We launched the process in March last year, and it took a while, as you know. So the beauty of B Corp is not just a certification you do once and you forget about it. No, you have to renew it every 3 years. So meaning that as soon as we become B Corp, we already had a roadmap for the next 3 years of what we want to achieve. Again, not to get a better score, but clearly, first, you want to make sure that what you said you were doing like 3 years ago is still valid, and that you improve, because, we all want to be better.
So that takes me to the next point, which is when you're talking to a seed or even pre-seed founder, they have so many things to juggle with, right? They need to find a business plan. They need to find product market fit. They need to hire, to get partnerships, and fundraise, right? And how can they, on top of it, become impact experts, ramp up on ESG understanding, and on top of it, do the process to become B Corp, which is a hassle. So would you say that maybe Astanor has been able to, because you've got the critical size, you got the staff, I believe you're 30 people in the team. How do you juggle with this, saying that it might be too premature, too early for most companies, and also for funds that are just not at your scale?
Clearly you need to be careful on the timing. We will never push if it doesn't make sense. Same we do, life cycle assessment is a requirement for portfolio companies. And this is something that'll take much more time and commitment than a B Corp, to be fair. So what we do is that over the last 5 years, we really build this shelf of solutions that our portfolio companies have access to. We built a Notion page where they have access to all the resources. We do calls with them once a quarter to identify where we can help them. So, that's really what we call the value add of being an impact investor. We are the sustainability partner of all portfolio companies. So we bring solutions to them to make sure that they can easily become B Corp, easily do a life cycle assessment, easily whatever they need to, and if we don't have that on the shelf, awesome. There's one more thing we can add on the shelf that will be, needed for sure by one of the others. So clearly on seed, we don't do pre-seed, but seed, we usually don't bother them with B Corp. They're really getting out of the ground. But from Series A, we start really getting them into the ID, that it makes sense. And to make sure that the ID is even, printed, There's one legal thing you need to do when you become a B Corp is that you need to change your articles of incorporation. Something that what we realized in the past, we were doing the fundraise, we were closing the round, and then 6 months later, the company was, okay, let's be B Corp. So you had to go back to your shareholders, you have to spend time and do the change of articles of incorporation. So now what we've learned is that when we do a fundraise, we actually do the change of articles of incorporation at the time of the fundraising. Then, meaning that it doesn't mean that the company has to become B Corp tomorrow, but when they're ready, at least this is done and it's easy. So I think we just try to make, again, learning, we learn, and we try to make the process easy.
That's awesome. Not forcing it on the founders, but very much carrying the load for them, right? But they've already made the decision themselves.
It's super important.
So now I'm really intrigued. What about this Notion page? That seems like a treasure trove of resources. Is this a secret sauce of Astanor, or is it something that you could open source?
Good point on the latest. Like at this point, it's still like a secret recipe in a way from Astanor and available for portfolio companies also because, we guide them through the Notion and on everything that's there. And I think sometimes, you still need to spend a lot of time on a one-to-one basis. And that's why we do, a call at least once a quarter and sometime if needed once a month with our portfolio companies to support them on the journey. So as of today, it's still like in-house resources for all portfolio companies.
Now, you've said in the past that you want more collaboration amongst funds, right? So that we don't have to swim on our parallel swim tracks and can reuse the work that has already been done. Since you're one of the oldest impact funds, you're one of the largest. Don't you think you should maybe give away more and then help the funds kind of figure it out?
I think we try to give as much as possible. We shared, our template of code of conduct because we have templates. We've been sharing our impact clause as well completely publicly. So we publish an impact report every year and in which I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but it's a lot about sharing what we have. And especially the first two ones where we didn't have much data and much realized impact is really sharing about the approach and the methodology. So I will say that we've been sharing a lot. And indeed, some of the things like the impact committee meeting that we do with our portfolio companies once a quarter, it's with our little family, which is also important sometimes to spend time as a family with all portfolio companies to share and to get like a free discussion. So yes, at some point we could share more, but I think we've been sharing a lot and we keep on sharing because as I mentioned earlier, for us, sustainability is a lot about sharing. And that's why we participate to panel, we do conferences, we write reports to make sure we share as much as possible.
It's a fine line to find, right? Because it is a competitive space. You're competing for LPs, especially in this environment where it's a little tougher to grab the big checks. So you want to give away a little bit, but keep your moat, right? Your defensibility, which is you want to be regarded by the institutional guys as one of the top brands on impact, and keep the head start. Healthy.
Yes, but again, I think sharing is caring, so we keep on sharing. And I think that's, you need to find the right balance. And I think sometimes, there are a lot of internal things as well, which is only like kind of internal for portfolio companies as well. So we'll have to redefine the notion in a way that is not made for that. It was made for the Astanor family initially, but at some point, yes, definitely. But I will say that a lot of the pieces that within this notion are already been shared publicly.
Awesome. And we're going to try to share over the next 10, 12 minutes, a lot, right? Some we can share. So first of all, a lot of the funds become Article 9 compliant. That comes with a host of things. You don't even realize upfront what you're getting yourself into. Typically, you need one person that is full-time dedicated to impact measurement. Do you recognize that is a necessity in the climate tech space, at least to become Article 9, or there are ways around while you can guarantee impact without being Article 9?
It's a good question. I really think that it's really valuable, Article 9. And I think the SFDR regulation, even if it's far from perfect, had a lot of good things in it. In a way, when, Article 9 and the PAI, the Principal Adverse Impact Indicators, were out, to us, we felt fine. It's, everything we've been building is completely aligned to that. So it doesn't going to change a lot. We already collect the data, most of them, except maybe a few weird one indicators that we never thought about before, like the unadjusted pay gap or things like that. But most of these indicators we were collecting before. So to us, that seemed to be like definitely a no-brainer, and felt it will be quite light. I must admit it hasn't been a light process. And more than, just impact person, we have an amazing compliance officer, director that's doing an amazing job as well on this front, and is passionate because, again, that's one thing I love about the way we built Astanor is not just the impact team, is everyone is driven by impact. The investment team is impact driven, and the lawyers, the compliance, the marketing, everyone is impact driven. So that's core to what we do. Going back to the question, sorry.
Can you paint us a picture, actually, out of 30 people, how many people are fully dedicated to impact, measurement, and...
So we're lucky to be three, which is a large team, but at the same time, we spend a lot of time on, we're member of the ESG committee at Invest Europe. We're member of Project Frame. We're member of the Finance for Biodiversity Pledge and Foundation. And every time when we're a member is to be a voice, of not only a climate VC fund, but climate, nature, and people fund. So for us, it's important to be part of this initiatives to make sure we can share what we've done. And that's one way for us to sharing, is sometimes not to share like directly like a Notion page, but actually to share by being part, a member. And at Invest Europe, for instance, we are the voice of the VC, of the impact VC alongside another one. And same for Finance for Biodiversity Pledge and Foundation. So, we really try to make sure that we have our voice there. And again, in fact, Project Frame as well, we one of the only non-pure climate funds. So we're trying to do the work for the others. So I think we do the heavy lifting for some of those smaller funds, indeed, that don't have the resources. We try to always go to the next project that could benefit to our peers as well.
And so going back to the Article 9 question, is if you were to set a mental threshold or a number, right? So you should not become an Article 9 because it's too heavy. If you're not a 100 million euro fund, for example, something like this, do you have this mental framework, or you say everyone should aspire to, but be aware of the pain?
I think it's better to be like everyone should think of becoming Article 9, even if you're small. Again, also it depends a lot of the space in which you invest. Series seed, what's the point in a way? The principal adverse impact indicators don't make much sense for a seed deal. They really start to make sense from a Series B, I will say. So I will say start thinking about it if you definitely invest in a Series A space and above. But I think that's a tricky part where I think some LPs might just want that because they want the stamp. They will not even look at you if you're not. But I think, as we all know, the SFDR regulation hasn't been done for the private market. They've been done for the entire financial market. And the VCs are a niche within that. So,
That's
clearly
right.
It hasn't been done for us. At the same time, I do think there are some valuable inputs from the SFDR that are helpful. But for really small and funds targeting Series C, I don't think that it's worth so much effort.
Right. Now, another big piece of question is LCAs, so life cycle assessments. This is a big chunk of work. Yeah. How do you measure that at Astanor before you invest? Is it something that you push back until you divest your investment? How do you do it? And what do you suggest other funds should proceed if they don't have your capacity to invest as much as impact?
Definitely. I think LCA is a need. It's a need and it's a journey. I think we've learned funds over the last 5 years. LCA used to be done by large sustainability consulting firms like the Quantis, for instance. And there used to be a black box that you pay sometimes even 50K and you get a PowerPoint report or PDF where you don't really understand any of the data behind. That was more or less the way the first time we tackled an LCA. That was from one of our companies that did that with an external consultant. And I was like, okay, how can we use that? And so there was definitely this huge learning that, okay, one thing that we know, LCAs need to be internalized within our portfolio companies. Going on to your question on when it has to be done, ideally pre-investment, because definitely, like to me, without an LCA, you're more or less blind. You don't know exactly what the impact your product is going to have on the people on the planet. So ideally before. Sometimes time make it not possible. So in this case, we go through, research LCA, past LCA, and trying to understand, okay, get a good understanding and idea of what will be the numbers. But definitely pre-investment, we need some numbers. Is that actual number on the portfolio companies, or does it come from peer research and others? That's a mix, depend. But clearly post-investment, if a company has an impact on one of our 3 planet KPI, it's clearly written in the shareholder agreement they need to do a life cycle assessment. They need to embark on this journey with us. And I can say it's a journey because it's not an easy one. For us, as I mentioned, we want that to be internalized because it's not a static LCA. You don't want one every 3 years. An LCA is dynamic. You need to build that into your day-to-day practices because having the data will make your process more efficient on a day-to-day basis. And as we know, all portfolio companies, the whole process is going to evolve from time of investment to when we exit. So, the processing, the raw materials they're going to use is going to change from soy to pea to something else. So you need to have these inputs to change whenever it's needed. So the way we've been working with experts in the field of LCA. We don't do LCA in-house. We thought about that. And at some point we said, no, we don't want to do it in-house because we prefer to use experts in the field, in their different fields. But what's extremely important is to get someone within our portfolio company to take the load, to be the experts, to bring LCA to the next level in-house. So what we bring to them, we bring either large consulting firm that will come to, get them on board with the first LCA. But more importantly, we bring our mentors. So we have mentors that will be with our portfolio companies to build the product with them, to the LCA from A to Z, the Excel, the tool, whatever is needed for them to be able to get the in-house LCA that will bring them the high quality data that they need.
So if I were to summarize, you basically have someone internally that is the project manager of the LCA project, where you accompany the founders to get on board that journey, but you externalize the actual number crunching, which is the complex part, right? Sourcing the right data. Is that correct?
The point is not, it's to get an expert within our portfolio company. So we need someone like an engineer that knows the data, that knows exactly the processing. So maybe sometimes, most of the time, they don't know anything about LCA, but they're good with numbers. They understand the process of, precision fermentation or electrical autonomous structures, depending on the portfolio company. And we bring an external mentor expert that's going to train this person within the portfolio company and how to do an LCA. So
Gotcha. And you cover the cost.
We used to at the time, something that we do less at the moment, and it's the financing of the LCA is an interesting point. But we don't finance it directly. It's something but we negotiate a lot of the fee because in a way, some of the costs from our mentors are paid by us. So the mentoring is partially paid by us, and they pay more for the service of building the data and building the Excel or building the tool if it's within a tool. So indeed, that's something that we thought a lot about, what would be the best financing, because at the end of the day, the LCA is not just for Astanor. It's for any of the other investors in the cap table. So how can you mutualize the cost? How can you do something, that, when you do a fundraising, actually, 10% of the fundraise is allocated to pure impact kind of projects. Or, 10% might be a bit lot. But, something that we keep on thinking about, how can we put more money dedicated to that? Because indeed, that can be an issue for companies because they're not rewarded for the impact they create today, while we need them to be able to, get the credit for what they do.
That's interesting what you're saying. Do you consider that what I would qualify as light LCA is something that is done up front, where you try to number crunch based on publicly available data or something because you clearly like data at the business level. They haven't really hit their growth milestones, but you conduct a full LCA at the end of the fund life cycle when you divest on this company, because you then have a historical track of everything they've accomplished. And you report that to your LPs. Not the pre-LCA or the light LCA, but the end LCA.
The LCA that you will build over time. Because again, it's a building. It's not like you don't do it once. Honestly, the way you can improve your LCA is a journey.
All right. And so another thing is your impact creation report, which is really great. Thanks so much for publicizing this. You've done this for, I believe, 3 years in a row.
Yes.
And if we were to unpack the granularity of this, you cover some of the metric tons, the hectares of land, some of the water use, et cetera, et cetera. How much of this is internalized? How much of this is externalized? And how can other funds get inspired by it and replicate?
So all the data come from the LCA or from the impact work we do with our portfolio companies. Because think about all the portfolio companies that have an impact on the people and so social and health. This is not coming from an LCA. So you need to think about how you're going to build those metrics as well. I think one point that's important. So again, for others, they need to do LCA. They need to spend a lot of time with their portfolio companies to really understand what is the impact pathway of my company. What is the net positive impact that my company has on the people on the planet with its product or its service. The issue we had 2 years ago, when we were saying the metric tons, the square meter of land or the acres of land, more roughly, was that when we were telling that to our LP, they were saying, "Oh, cool," but that doesn't really ring a bell. I mean, greenhouse gas emissions, people get it a bit more, but not so much. But then when you sometimes people translate water into Olympic pools, or they translate acres into football pitches, which is, again, doesn't mean anything. And it's
a convention,
pitch.
yeah.
It's conventional, and it's you give it a flavor, you give it's anecdotal. So that's where we really started this process of saying, okay, what makes sense for a lot of people, it's money. Mm-hmm. So actually, we launched a full project with, again, external experts in the field of impact valuation, of translating all our net positive impact into a monetary value. It's really impact valuation. So saying that with every greenhouse gas emissions I've avoided, with all this increased remuneration that I'm bringing to these farmers, with all this health issue that I prevented because I've brought something more nutritious and healthy to my consumers, this is the impact that I'm going to have on natural capital, social capital, and human capital. Really understanding your impact pathways and monetizing those net positive impacts. Knowing that, to me, at the end of the life of the fund, what I want us to be able to communicate is that my fund did a 2x or 4x on return on investment, but we did 8x on impact. So what we call the impact multiple on investment, the IMOI. So I'm not only reporting on financial returns, I'm also reporting on impact return. So you really have these double metrics, because we not impact or finance. We both. So we want to report on both metrics.
Well, I have to claim that I've never heard of the IMOI, but this is an amazing figure, impact measure or return on investment. This is really, really helpful. And by the way, so since you're saying you're always kind of trying to push the envelope on the impact side, what is the next evolution of this whole thing as a fund level? And I'll probably trigger the conversation on the biodiversity side, where it's clearly lagging behind. If we consider the climate tech space, it has evolved tremendously over the last 5 years on the climate measurement side, but biodiversity is lagging behind. Do you think it's just trending behind and it will just follow the same set of regulations?
I think it will go much faster, because we've learned, with greenhouse gas, we took years to get where we are today. I think we're going to learn, we're going to reuse the frameworks, the SBTN, the SBT has become SBTN, you just add nature, or the TCFD, you just change to TNFD. So we learn from those frameworks and we adapting them for nature. Clearly, nature is complex, much more complex and interdependent. So, it's less straightforward, but it's not because it's less straightforward that you should not start measuring it. And that's why with life cycle assessment, you get really valuable information on nature and biodiversity. So I feel often, people are saying, okay, this nature is too complex. No, it's okay, it's complex, but you have to start somewhere. And I'm not saying that LCA are perfect. For instance, on soil health or marine biodiversity, LCAs tend to be not that helpful. So, okay, not that helpful. How can we get it to be more helpful? How can we maybe not use the LCA, but use our impact valuation model to factor the fact that you avoided, fishing fish in the ocean, or that you actually improve soil health by bringing biostimulants and biocontrol? So I think most important is to start. And then when you start to understand the issue, the data is not easy on biodiversity, but you have to start somewhere. So the earlier you start, the best it is.
Awesome, man. It's been a 5-year journey for you, but what would be the advice for people that are just getting started, or the funds that are trying to hire experts? There's an army of people that really want to get in, and they see that the impact measurement could be an angle of attack, right? One entry point. What would be the best learning point? How can they ramp up?
I think there's so many good resources out there now. So many good impact reports that people can rely on, look at, and get inspired of. And so many good podcasts, panel, webinars. So I will say that, I would have loved to have what people have today 5 years ago, because there was nothing there 5 years ago. So I think a space where people can educate themselves. And clearly we need We do a lot of, in fact, classes in university on impact investing and what it is to be an impact investor, because I think we need to get that, at universities as well, from all these pre-graduates that, can learn that even before. But I will say for anyone, there's so much out there, so much collaboration as well. There's so many groups where, we on WhatsApp group, on monthly meetings, quarterly meetings. So everyone is eager to share, eager to find the best way to measure impact, and not to measure because as measure is important, because then you can attract more investors, but more importantly that we can all create more material impact, because we all want to have a positive impact on the people on the planet.
Any gold nuggets, any kind of directions? You mentioned WhatsApp groups or communities. Can you think off the top of your head a few directions?
I will say some of the projects like Project Frame, they're doing an amazing work, and I think they're really inspiring. I think, as I said again, impact reports, the more you can read, some of them are pretty amazing. I mean, clearly I love the one that we've been publishing, but there are others that have been doing a really good job as well. And I think the most important is to not be afraid. Yes, impact means a lot of data. It means that you have to, really go in depth into understanding of the impact pathway of your portfolio company, but the sooner is the best, because it takes time. So you need to make sure you collect the right data from day one. So don't be afraid of going into the journey as early as possible. And it will take time. And people are cognizant that it's not going to be solved in 2 days. But don't hide yourself behind the excuse, it's too much data, you don't have the resources. Just try from day one.
For sure. And there's a massive imposter syndrome of people standing on the sidelines saying that's too high of a step, right? And they think that because we have those conversations, they sound fairly educated. We have cracked this, but the truth is we're still trying to hack it. You've kind of hacked it over the last 5 years. I launched a fund and we were kind of clueless and we had to learn along the way. So it's a learning process. Everyone has a path to learn. And frankly, we make it sound more settled than it actually is. It's ever evolving. Everyone can play catch up.
Fully agree. And I think that's the one thing, the beauty of sustainability is people love sharing. So, that's the one thing that every time someone contacts me to say, oh, how do you do things? I will always go back and have a discussion, because I know I will learn something, and hopefully I can, bring something to them. So I think the sharing is amazing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Leslie, for this insightful conversation. I love your kindness. I love the sharing aspect. So we will continue following your journey.
Thanks a lot. And thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. And I keep looking forward to the next podcast as well that you publish.
That's great. Great to hear. And thanks all of you guys for listening.